Welcome to Michael Potts F1, everything Formula One, but from a photographer's point of view. The 2023 mid-season report. So join me in this look back over all the races so far, and let's have a look and see which drivers are performing to their expectations, which ones need to do a little bit more work over the off seasons, and which ones have already been fired. Usually, at this point, the silly season is already rife with rumours and speculation, drivers moving from here to there, but this year has been suspiciously quiet. All we've had so far is the rather surprising mid-season change at AlphaTauri, and that's where this review begins. Nick de Vries only lasted 10 races. His high point was a 12th place in Monaco. He only managed to finish better than his teammate on 2 occasions. There was very high expectation of him, having been a Formula 2 and a Formula E champion. However, the results didn't come his way. The reason for this was a combination of factors. The car that AlphaTauri produced wasn't particularly good. The season started with racing tracks that he was unfamiliar with, and there was a good dollop of bad luck, and possibly a little bit of bad judgment. One of the lowest points was probably the shunt he caused at the Miami Grand Prix, braking far too late at the start and causing contact with Lando Norris. My favourite shot of him is this one in Monaco, on his way to a solid 12th place. It was shot at the exit of the swimming pool section, a place that you can get really close to the cars as they navigate this tricky section of the track. He is now out of Formula One completely, and he's studying leadership and negotiation at Harvard Business School while he plans his next move. You can't help but think that he would have done better going to Williams or Alpine, 2 other teams who had offered him a drive. Both have produced better cars and have a much less pressurized environment than the Red Bull AlphaTauri setup. He has been replaced by Daniel Ricciardo, a driver with a lot of experience, with race wins, but somebody who has lost form and passion for the sport. 2 races in, he looks completely different, much more energized compared to the driver of the McLaren days. But make no mistake, Daniel is now one of the drivers under the most pressure in Formula One. His job is to impress the leadership at Red Bull. If he can do that, his old race seat might be available alongside Max Verstappen in a title-winning car. Failure would undoubtedly be the end of his Formula One adventure. Would Red Bull keep him in AlphaTauri next year when they have Liam Lawson and Amuya Iwasa banging down the door? My shot of Ricciardo is of him returning to the paddock at the Hungarian Grand Prix. He's in his race suit, zooting down the paddock on a scooter. By contrast, Yuki Tsunoda is flying high. Many other drivers have named him as one of the top performers in 2023. will.i.am popularized a chant for him at the British Grand Prix. And yes, I know 3 points doesn't sound like a lot, but in the context of having the weakest car, that's huge. He also has 3 11th places to his name. This year, he's really impressing. He's ticking all the right boxes. My shot of Tsunoda comes from the Belgian Grand Prix, where he produced an amazing drive to finish 10th. It was a great response to the added pressure of Daniel Ricciardo returning to the team. He's driving up to the top of Radion with plumes of spray coming off the back of the car. Alfa Romeo are in a bit of a strange position this year. They didn't start as well as they did last year, and they seem to have gone backwards compared to the other teams. Point scoring opportunities have been rather rare, and when they have come across, the team hasn't been able to capitalize on them, like in Hungary this year, where they started 5th and 7th, and unfortunately couldn't turn any of that into points. The team is in transition, making a move to Audi in 2026, but they still can't lose sight of being competitive in 2023. Next year, it'll no longer be called Alfa Romeo. At this stage, we don't know what the new team will be called, but unfortunately, there is a real sense of stagnation. Bottas is ahead on points, well, 5-4 in his favour. He does look a lot more relaxed and a lot more himself with his new mullet and moustache. But his new identity is not translating into points. It is really hard scoring points in Formula One these days with an ultra-competitive midfield, especially when you have one of the least competitive cars. Bottas is also not dominating the inter-team battle as much as he would have liked, or as much as he was doing last year. My shot of him comes from the Bahrain Grand Prix, where he secured 8th place, at a track where he generally does go quite well. It's a slow shutter speed shot with the lights of the track streaking behind him. There is no immediate risk for his race seat. However, he'll be 36 when the team becomes Audi, and he needs to start showing why he deserves to be one of the drivers and not just somebody who's keeping the seat warm until the transition is complete. Zhou Guanyu has performed a lot better this year than I expected. He's consistently done well against his much more experienced teammate, but generally he's lacked the car to turn promise into results. And there's been a sprinkling of bad luck in there as well. In Hungary, he produced a miracle drive to claim 5th position on the grid. Unfortunately, at the start, the car went into anti-stall and he dropped back, then he caused a multiple car collision at the first corner, accounting for both Alpines and Daniel Ricciardo. My shot of Zhou comes from the Spanish Grand Prix, where he drove brilliantly to claim his second 9th place of the season. Currently, he's out of contract for next season, and he needs a big second half of the year to show that he deserves to stay in Formula 1. There is the looming figure of Théo Pourchaire, who is currently leading Formula 2, and is pushing really hard for a race seat. Haas have had a bit of a mixed season this year. They've been excellent in qualifying, but then fallen off dramatically during the race. The car appears to be a rocket ship over one lap, but then is really bad at tyre management. In the hands of Nico Hulkenberg in changeable conditions, it's a real threat to a top 3 position in qualifying. However, during the race, the team really struggles to hold those positions. With neither driver in contract for next year, there is everything to play for in the second half of the year. Nico has had the better season points-wise so far. A stunning, ambitious drive in the sprint race in Austria gave him 6th place, which was his best result. In his second comeback in Formula 1, he has been amazing on Saturdays, just not that good on Sundays. I bet he's really looking forward to Las Vegas, which is a Saturday night race. Maybe that's what he needs to score some really good points. His highlight was probably the 2nd place in qualifying he achieved in the Canadian Grand Prix. Unfortunately, he also incurred grid penalties and was moved further back down the grid for the start. My shot of Nico is this one taken through the trees as he dances around the wet track in Montreal. He's a master in changeable conditions, and 2023 has been the ideal year for him with so many rain-affected races. He has a very good chance of remaining on the grid for 2024. Kevin has been slightly overshadowed by his teammate. He got good points finishes in Miami and Saudi Arabia, and a strong 4th place start in Miami was probably the highlight. Unfortunately, he has a lot less points this year than he did at the same point last year. My shot of Kevin comes from Miami, where he qualified so well. Here, his wheel is in the air as he flies through the chicane. Both drivers are out of contract next year, but Magnussen is probably the most vulnerable. There are rumours that Zhou might make a switch to the American team, and with his $20 million sponsorship, it could be very hard for Gene Haas to say no. Williams are probably the surprise package of the season so far. The expectations at the start of the year were very low. But now they're joint 7th with Haas, on the back of some really good drives from Alex Albon. The car is phenomenally quick in a straight line. It's just the turning bits that they seem to have a problem with. Both drivers will be licking their lips for Monza in 2 races' time. It's the track with the fastest straight bits and the least turny bits of the whole season. Albon's had a stellar year so far. He's outclassed his rookie teammate both in qualifying and in race results, the best being a remarkable 7th place in Canada, where he was able to use the Williams straight line speed to keep his rivals at bay. And that's where my shot of Alex comes from. There are 4 cars hungrily trying to get past the Williams, and he's managing to make it as wide as possible. In his 2nd season at Williams, he has completely rebuilt his career from the difficulties experienced at Red Bull. Alex is now one of the form drivers of the season, and will be high in demand when the 2025 silly season kicks in. Logan Sargeant has been making steady progress as a rookie this year. He hasn't set the world on fire, but he hasn't embarrassed himself either. Currently 19th in the standings, with a best place finish of 11th at the British Grand Prix. He'll be looking forward to the high-speed tracks where he can try and score his first points. He is out of contract next year, so has to show Williams he deserves more time and is worthy of a place in the team. My shot of Logan comes from qualifying in the British Grand Prix. Here he's getting a bit side-on and a bit squiggly at Stowe Corner, with slick tyres on a damp track. Let's see what he can do in the second half of the year. Alpine have had a difficult start to the season so far. There have been some highlights, but far too many lowlights. A lot of those seem to be self-inflicted. There was a management clear-out mid-season, which hasn't really sparked a lot of confidence. It's never a good sign in Formula 1 when you're firing most of your senior staff halfway through a campaign. The two drivers have accidentally crashed into each other twice, and the team currently lies in 6th place in the ranking. That's not where they wanted to be after such a bold, such an assertive car launch at the start of the year. Ocon has been the stronger of the two drivers, with a podium in Monaco, and that's just reward for a driver that's sadly underrated. His season would have been a lot better if not for the two tangles with his teammate. My shot of him comes from his heroic 3rd place in Monaco. Taken through the gap under the protective barrier, it gives a very different perspective to a modern Formula 1 car. Monaco is the only track you can get such a shot. Pierre Gasly recently said that this has been the most unlucky season he's had so far in Formula 1. He did make the right move going to a more competitive car than the struggling AlphaTauri he was in, but he would have been expecting to fight more frequently for podiums. His 3rd place in the Belgium sprint race was a timely reminder of his talent and his experience, but he needs a lot more of that in the second half of the year. My photograph of him is the shot of the pink Alpine in front of the blue mosque in Saudi Arabia. I still think this is the team's best livery and should be run in all races. And that brings us to the end of part 1. Join me in a few days' time when I'll be looking at the rest of the teams and drivers. Please do let me know in the comments below if you think I got any of these rankings and reviews incorrect. Until the next one, goodbye.